Welcome back to Torah in 10, Parsha's Shoftim. I'm Jody Berkel, and I'm so excited to be here with you again. What's the life-changing idea Rabbi Sacks of Blessed memory teaches us this week? To lead is to serve. The greater your success, the harder you have to work to remember that you're there to serve others. They're not there to serve you. Leadership can be a tricky thing. Our Parsha tells us, when you enter the land that the Lord is giving you, and you have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you will say, I will set a king over me like the surrounding nations, set over you a king whom the Lord chooses. Looking at this, we would think from a Jewish perspective that having a king is a good thing. Rabbi Sacks says, it's not so simple. On the one hand, the Parsha does say, set over you a king. This is a positive commandment, and Maimonides counts it as one of the 613. On the other hand, the Torah tells us not to be like the other nations. We're meant to be kadosh, holy, which roughly means to be set apart, singular, distinctive, unique. Jews are supposed to have the courage to be different, to be part of, but not entirely, of the world around us. We see with the kings of Israel that their lives were filled with inconsistency. God gave 3 commandments and the reasons for them laid out in the Parsha that pertain specifically to kings. And they are that a king shouldn't have too many wives, too many horses, or too much money. Why these? The Torah explains that a love of horses would lead the people to rely on Egypt, because that's where the horses came from. And too many wives would distract him from fulfilling his duties. But apparently, it wasn't necessary for the Torah to give a reason for cautioning against too much money, because we all know the dangers of excess wealth. Even King Solomon, the wisest of all men, author of Song of Songs, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes, thought that his superior wisdom would protect him from these sins. The Talmud says he thought he could break all the rules and stay uncorrupted. Despite all his wisdom, he was wrong. Our sages use King Solomon as an example, all the more so with us. We have a Jewish law, the laws of Yichud, that say that a man and a woman can't be alone in a room together. So it's not including our spouses, our parents, and our family. So if I have a meeting with a rabbi, we leave the door open. When people hear about this, they say, really? You can't trust yourself? And I look back at them and I say, really? You don't know anyone who had an affair with a colleague or a coworker? If we're being real, we can't say this won't happen, because it happens all the time. All this is to teach us that we should never be overly confident, that we should never believe that the laws of the Torah are not applicable to us, that we can handle the many temptations of our society and not succumb. Let's go deeper. Rabbi Sacks says fundamental to Judaism is the idea of servant leadership. The Torah doesn't tolerate arrogance. There's no room for me in an arrogant heart, says God. Arrogance is an occupational hazard of kingship. To protect himself against this disease, the king was commanded to write 2 Torah scrolls, one of which he kept in his treasury, and the other he had to carry with him at all times. The 2 scrolls were to remind him that although his position is one of a king, and as much wealth that he may have in his treasury, he is bound by the Torah's commandments just like every other person, because above all, he too is a servant of God. Humility is the essence of royalty, because to lead is to serve. When we look at the symbols of other empires, Egypt, for example, we see a pyramid, wide at the base, narrow at the top, meaning The people are there to support the leader. Not so in Judaism. The great Jewish symbol, the menorah, inverts the triangle. It's wide at the top and narrow at the base. The leader is there to support the people. Rabbi Sacks says, good leaders create followers. Great leaders create leaders. In his book, From Good to Great, Jim Collins tells us that great organizations are ones with level 5 leaders, people who are personally modest, but fiercely ambitious for the team. They don't seek their own success, but the success for those they lead. This is counterintuitive because we often think of leaders as people who are hungry for power. Many are, because power often corrupts. I'm thinking of the song line, "You trade your passion for glory." Even King Solomon, the wisest of all men, could not be saved from temptation. What type of leaders are we? Each one of us leads in some way. Are we creating followers to build our egos? Or through our leadership, are we inspiring people to become leaders themselves, to take responsibility for their lives in their homes, places of work, and community? On my wall, I have a quote from Simon Sinek on the topic of how great leaders inspire action. And he says, there are leaders and those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. This is a life-changing idea. To lead is to serve. The greater our success, the harder we have to work to remember that leadership is an opportunity to serve, not a trumpet call to self-importance. Have a beautiful Shabbat.